I'll introduce you to our first speaker. It's Michael Smedes, and he is local. He's from Canberra. And Michael's the Chief Data Officer from ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics. Michael is also, apart from being Chief Data Officer, is a General Manager, and he looks after statistics and infrastructure division. He has an extensive background in official statistics, having worked in Australian Bureau of Statistics, New Zealand, the International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations across a broad range of statistics. Lots of statistics in there. Prior to his current role, he was most recently the General Manager of the Social Statistics Division at the ABS, and prior to that, the Global Advisor on National Accounts at the United Nations. Michael is going to present us a business case on best practice for design and delivery of an approach to data access that balances safeguards of data with availability for the public good. So Michael is going to present the business case, and hopefully we'll have time for questions. And we have a microphone, just being mindful of people who are online. Let's wait for the microphone to be given to you to ask questions. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction. Yes, Michael Smedes, Chief Data Officer at the ABS. Really quite pleased to be here today. Talking about data access in the ABS, striking the balance between making data available for the public good and safeguarding it. So before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the country throughout Australia and recognising their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to their cultures and elders, past and present. So, harnessing the value of data. Recently, the Data and Digital Government Strategy was released. That included delivering for all people and business simple and seamless services to gauge needs and develop solutions through the whole data life cycle. The ABS now has two clear lines of business. On the one hand, producing official statistics, which we've been doing for many years, and the newer service, which is delivering data services. We are also often providing safe and secure infrastructure services, supporting others in government to build their capability in managing, building and using data. It is our role to ensure high quality and fit for purpose data, enabling objective insights and policy development. We bring people together to solve common policy problems through our data and to help draw out insights with those who may not have the capability to do that themselves. All this means that the ABS is increasingly becoming more and more connected and engaged with government, and it means that enabling effective data access is at the centre of what we do. So you can imagine the old model, really producing official statistics, putting those out in some aggregated table form on the website, and then people consuming those statistics. There wasn't the same connection there as there is with providing data services, where there's that higher level of engagement and interaction. Okay, so now I'll talk about data access in the ABS, how and why the ABS manages data access. So there's many different types of data that the ABS manages, all with different considerations and requirements. Closed data is data that is not available for research or external use, such as data about our employees or finances. Open data is the data that's released to the public. You can find this on the ABS website or through free to access tools like Table Builder. In between those two is the shared data, where I'll focus my discussion today. This means data that is shared beyond the ABS, but where controls are put in place to ensure that the data is being accessed by the right people and for the right reasons. The ABS takes a privacy by design approach in order to manage risk, meaning we assess privacy risks at every stage of data integration, from project initiation to approval, to the acquisition and to the linking of data and to the access and analysis of linked data. Of course, we comply with all the legislation and relevant standards when enabling this, but we also have a strong eye to not just meeting the legislation, but also meeting the expectations that society may have, considering the ethics of the approach, etc. Separation principle is a way to protect identities of people and organisations when linking information to create data sets. This means that identifying information such as names and addresses is kept separate from analytical data such as a person's income. Authorised users will only have access to the information needed for them to perform their role. No one using the data can see or use both personal and analytical information at the same time. We also follow a data minimisation approach. This means that only data needed for a project can be shared, and that researchers can only access data on a need-to-know basis. Our data infrastructure must only store, allow access or use of data within Australia. Hosting environments must meet security requirements and have IRAP assessments. We also abide by the 5 safes, which takes a multi-dimensional approach to managing disclosure risks, which I'll discuss more shortly. A key challenge for data custodians is to provide data with maximum utility for users, but still maintain the confidentiality of the information. Every data release carries some risk of disclosure, so the benefits of each release, its utility or usefulness for research and statistical purposes, must substantially outweigh the risks and be clearly understood. These are just some of the methods that the ABS uses to keep our data safe and to demonstrate best practices in how we enable data access. It's no simple task, and there's a lot of work that needs to happen from lots of people to make each one of these steps work. So I might talk first now about accessing data. So clearly, many of you will be familiar with using the ABS website. That's the way that most of the public interacts with the ABS. There's also an information consultancy service that you can email with the address up there. And these would all be quite familiar to people. People might not be as familiar with other ways to access the data. Our microdata download, what is called SEED, the SEAD there, and the data lab, which are all the more controlled environments. There are many more steps to getting access to the data in these environments, and in many cases it comes with additional training, in some cases an additional cost. We also perform additional data consultancy services, which I mentioned, and every request to access data will have its reasons and motivations, and each request is assessed on those merits. So, working through some of those products I mentioned, particularly starting with the SEED, the Secure Environment for Analysing Data. This is a pretty new service that the ABS offers. This is part of our ABS Data Lab, and if you like, it's taking a portion of our ABS Data Lab and allowing our partner agencies to control their own environment, to take a section of that, and to manage that themselves and to share, analyse and output of their own data for research or modelling purposes. This is an infrastructure solution to a data access challenge that many agencies have, and it enables the ABS to support them to build their data capability. The SEED service, much like the broader ABS Data Lab, has safeguards in place to ensure data sharing and access. So you can well imagine that this particular product is quite popular. I'm not sure how many agencies we're up to. I'm going to say around about 12 now are taking advantage of this service, which has saved them from having to build and maintain their own data integration analytical environment. Okay, so quickly moving on from data access to how we ensure safe data sharing and access, which is all about the right people accessing the right data at the right time and for the right reasons. As I mentioned earlier, ensuring safe data is an end-to-end process and starts at the beginning of the data cycle. I'll speak about data integration as an example of how we employ best practice in data access. Safe and secure data integration and access starts with building trust. It means being transparent about use in collection, confidentialisation and processing, and safe dissemination, sharing and access. As I mentioned before, the ABIS employs the 5 SAFEs framework, which takes a multidimensional approach to managing disclosure risk. Each SAFE refers to an independent but related aspect of disclosure risks. The 5 SAFEs are safe people, projects, settings, data and output, all of which are requirements we must satisfy in order to manage our disclosure risk. The framework is designed to facilitate safe data release and prevent over-regulation to improve the utility or usefulness of data for research. This allows data custodians to place appropriate controls, not just on the data itself, but on the manner in which data is accessed. This means in practice that if we dial up the controls around who we allow to access our data, that we allow it to be accessed only for research projects that won't lead to harm, and we control the environment the data is accessed through, then we can improve the usefulness of the data by holding back slightly on the confidentiality treatments that we would routinely apply to open data on our website. The outputs that researchers are allowed to release from the secure environment are also tightly controlled and must meet similar standards to what we apply to our open data. So for those that have been around for a while, in the past, data access was all around preventing recognition, and it was really just about control of the data. In the new world of trying to open up access to data by applying a more nuanced and a fuller set of controls, then we can change the balance of the data we provide by controlling for other elements of risks, like the project that's being researched, or like the researchers themselves, or the environment in which that's happening. So this is increasingly the way, I guess, the world is moving. Certainly this is common across statistical institutions around the globe now to take this approach as opposed to a blunt confidentialisation approach. Okay, so the next development that is really aiming to open up the access to data and to enable more use of data in a safe and secure way is the Data Availability and Transparency Act, otherwise known or applied as the Data Scheme, which is a new framework for how we manage, share and access data. I won't go into this in detail, but there's a few key points that I want to touch on, namely, this scheme ensures that users are accredited. It creates an set of objective requirements that users must satisfy before they can access data, which in turn contributes to confidence in the safety of that data. It establishes a set of data sharing purposes and principles which ensure that data is only shared for the right reasons, and these are broadly in line with the 5 SAFEs framework I just mentioned. It creates a system in which users can request access to data, and it does it all in a centralised way. And lastly, it is helping create a culture of data sharing in government that will help build the capability and increase the use of data for informing government decision making. Like most agencies, the ABS is working through what the data scheme means for us, and we look forward to seeing it in operation. Okay. So now I'll just give a brief example of how all of this comes together to deliver on our commitment to inform Australia's important decisions while maintaining the security of data and maintaining the confidence of our data providers. So the unique value of integrated data. ABS integrated data assets have been widely used and support public policy, and the ABS is committed to continued access to our data to support this policy development. In 2021, as an example, we commenced weekly updates of Australian immunisation register data to what's called now PLIDA, so people might be familiar with this as previously been called MADIP, which is the collection of integrated Commonwealth data at a person level. So by integrating that immunisation record data with the data that's contained in the PLIDA, we were able to inform the Department of Health and enable them to monitor the socio-demographic trends in the uptake of the COVID-19 vaccine. This data informed the vaccine rollout and supported targeted measures for vulnerable population groups. This same data is now enabling other important policy work, such as the National Strategy for the Elimination of Cervical Cancer. From that project, we learned about vaccine uptake by language groups and countries of birth. This sort of information enabled more targeting development of policy. This is only possible when your data system is set up in a way that enables this sort of data collection, collation, access and analysis. And it is becoming increasingly expected in the post-COVID environment. So in this case, the Department of Health was able to identify population groups, including language groups in this table, that had lower vaccine uptakes, and to then target public health messaging to those groups. Okay, so what's next? So a bit of where we are now and where we've come from, but what are the next steps? So the next evolutionary step is what's called the National Disability Data Asset, and I hope many people here have heard about this really important development. With the National Disability Data Asset comes the Australian National Data Integration Infrastructure, or the ANDI. So the National Disability Data Asset is really a national collaboration between states and territories and the Commonwealth to take data sharing to the next level between governments of Australia. So in the previous example, I mentioned PLIDA. A limitation of PLIDA is that it's Commonwealth data. That's what makes up the PLIDA. The ambition with the National Disability Data Asset is to take that next step and to build this national sharing arrangements, which will have data from states, territories and Commonwealth. Of course, noting that when you're talking about delivering services like disability services, you really need the perspective of all the jurisdictions and the data all the jurisdictions have to really inform that in a national way. The ANDI, the Australian National Data Integration Infrastructure, which the asset is being built on, will provide the underlying set of infrastructure, an ICT system, a linkage approach and linkage spine, a set of governance arrangements, security protocols, etc., to really facilitate data integration activities at a national level. The aim is that once the NDDA is built and is in the ANDI environment, that then that environment is also made available for future data integration activities to ensure, again, that we don't have to keep rebuilding for particular purposes, but that we can reuse a set of infrastructure that's been through extensive security assessments and really has been developed to meet the expectations of data custodians, expectations of the public, etc. All this brings with it a new way to access data and will enable increasingly complex policy problems to be solved in a timely manner now and into the future. So that's the next evolutionary step. Also conscious, and we've heard a bit about this morning, that there are many more emerging opportunities. Data access is changing, and I hope you also find the ways that it may evolve over the coming years as exciting as we all do. AI, obviously, as we heard this morning, is developing rapidly, and I have no doubt it will have applications in the data access space in the future. One of the biggest things that we at the ABS have learned is that effective data access starts with effective partnerships and collaboration. This is an imperative and will only grow in importance as we move forward. The data scheme itself is an exciting development that will help to evolve how we manage data access. More broadly, technology is advancing quicker than ever. Advances allowing data to move into the cloud is enabling greater data access, and these advances will only continue. All of that said, and if it's the only thing I leave you with today, it's that safe and secure data access for researchers doesn't just happen. Having a robust data system in place is the base requirement to allow you to effectively enable data access. It is necessary to enable you to respond to these sorts of opportunities. It in itself requires constant evaluation, curation and evolution if it is to stay current and effective. I'll challenge you all to consider your own data systems and how they could be improved and evolved to enable more effective data access. Great. So thank you for the invitation to speak here today. Thanks for your time and turning up to listen. And feel free to reach out to me if you do want to discuss further. But we also have some time now where I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Hello, thanks for that presentation. I'm really keen to see what the kind of infrastructure and Andy approach will provide. Could you give us a little bit more information about, what Andy will, involve? Will it be on like a kind of cloud environment? Will it allow for, interoperability with other agencies?
Yeah, so the Andy, so you're referring particularly to the ICT component of the Andy, I guess.
I think so, but then how will that work with other agencies? How will that work with their data holdings in the short, medium term?
So the idea behind the Andy is that you share data once with an agency that's involved. So to step back a bit, I guess. The legislation the Andy has been built on is the data scheme and the Data Act. So accredited data service providers will be able to use the Andy for integration purposes. Those at this stage, those entities that are within the data scheme are Australian government entities and Australian universities. So those that have achieved accreditation will be able, as a data service provider, will be able to use that ICT environment to integrate data sets. The data will only need to be provided in there once, and then it can be repurposed with agreements, so there's not multiple flows of data. And then to use that data, you need to be a data user, accredited data user. Which again, at this stage of data scheme, is limited to Australian governments and Australian universities. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Are you able to comment on issues around sharing information or getting information from various states and territories and how that's going to work? I have an example where we're trying to share data, waste and recycling data amongst 8 territories and states, and it's really difficult even fundamentally to agree on terminology and definitions. Yeah. Is there anything there you'd like to comment on?
So it is incredibly difficult. So this is where I guess the National Disability Data Asset is an important next step, even though it does have a focus on providing and supporting analysis to inform the issues facing disabled Australians living with a disability. It is try to go further than that and set up a way of supporting data sharing between all the jurisdictions and the Commonwealth. It's long and it's slow and it's hard. So we've been working at this for, I'm going to say, 18 months on this, and we're just approaching the first round of data sharing agreements at this point, which are, sort of narrow in terms of being about health, for example. But the ambition is that that this all sets a precedent, a way. There's a lot of artefacts that underpin that agreement. There's a lot of, various data sharing policies. There's access policies. There's security policies. There's there's a whole range of infrastructure, including the ICT infrastructure that underpins that data sharing that should be able to be reused. But it's not easy. Like that's, you know, I don't want to be kid anybody about that. But that's why the National Disability Data Asset and the underlying ANDI is important, because that is so hard. And we still, even with the development of the DAT Act, we still have difficulties with various pieces of legislation being quite different in the different jurisdictions, and the different states and territories having different levels of freedom of what they can share and how they can share it based on their own legislation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was great, Michael. Carrie Walden from Melbourne Water. Just wondering whether you found that getting involved in the data scheme drove your metadata maturity at all? And do you prepare your metadata when you get a sharing request, or did you have to have that metadata produced before you could handle the sharing requests as they were coming through? Do you understand what I'm asking there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think on the whole, with some exceptions, I might get to the exceptions, because our business is data and our business is making data available. We've been doing that for a long time, whether through the website or whether through other data sharing agreements before the data scheme even came around. So I think we had a high level of maturity in that aspect that other agencies where data is not their sole purpose won't have, quite understandably. Where the issues that we're working through now is that the data scheme enables data sharing that we were never able to share before under our own legislation. And that's where it's really forced us to, you know, do quite a number of steps to think about the manner in which we share that data that before we wouldn't have been able to share, so we hadn't considered it. But for us, it was exceptions rather than rule. I think for other organisations that don't routinely share data, there will be, you know, a reasonable, significant amount of work to come up to speed with the data scheme requirements.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time. Thank you very much, Michael, for your presentation and the business case. And everyone can connect with Michael and ask more questions. Thank you.